Mhm. Leena is professor in Tartu University, and also represents Estonian Literature Museum.
Okay, sorry, now I can hear you as well. Okay, I'll try.
You're welcome, please.
Share screen. Okay, share.
Here we go. Yeah.
You
Okay.
can see.
Yes, please, let's move. Mhm.
Okay, so that was sudden. Sorry about that. I wanted to say also express my joy and gratitude of being able to be here, though only virtually, because I'm also amongst really good colleagues of mine with whom I have uh, worked together for many years, and I have been part of many Nord Plus projects that have been run by the Givestas Center, and it has really been an enriching experience for me. So thank you for having me. Okay, um, on to my topic. I will try to discuss briefly today in my presentation the concept of post-memory. And those of you who heard me speak in Stockholm when we had this seminar on post-memory, they know that I'm struggling with this concept, and I have tried since to move forward somewhat with this topic. And my presentation will be based on life stories in the Estonian Life Story Archive. Uh, right now, I think the archive has about 4,000 life stories, but of course, not all of them are diaspora life stories. But on this slide, you can simply see some uh, publications, and also the publications indicate life story competitions that we have had. They are on very many topics, and the last public call that we had was on submitting Corona diaries, and we received over 100 diaries, and now we are collecting correspondences and memories of correspondences, so that archive is a kind of a living thing. It's constantly evolving. But on that slide in the right hand corner, you can see the cover of the volume that was published out of one of the last more wide-ranging life story competitions that was launched as part of the centenary celebration, Estonia centenary celebrations. And it's titled, the call and also the volume is titled My Life and Love, Life Stories of Estonian People. And some life stories that I will be looking at come from that competition. And also I will base my talk on a collection of diaspora Estonians' life stories that was edited by Dina and Girs, and that consists of two sections, but my focus will be on the second section that is compiled on the basis of live story interviews with first, second, and third generation Estonians in Canada and the US. And these interviews were conducted during this Kotkajärve Metsaülikool, the Forest University, and they were conducted by the students of very well-known Estonian documentary playwright and director Merle Karusoo, and they were done in July 2000. But also the context, what I want to emphasize here is that the context of doing these interviews, that was very much in this Estonian or diaspora Estonian context, that people come together to learn more about Estonian history and culture and discuss Estonian things between them. So that definitely shapes the interviews. And I'm looking at the mass wave of mass emigration from Estonia and from all the Baltic states toward the end of the Second World War in the fall of 1944. As you know, that this was the time when the Russians started coming back and fearing further repressions. Um, um, People from the Baltic states mass emigrated to the West, and it is also referred to as the Great Escape to the West. And you can see on the slide approximate numbers of Estonians, but that's not just fall of 1944, but all together. But it is mass emigration anyway. And on the cover of this book, you can see that there is an image of a boat on the sea, and a fairly small boat on the sea. And not all Estonians escape to the west by the sea, but this is a prototypical understanding and image of the escape and the escape journey. That is something that Tiina Kers, who has been and works on post memory, and who herself has diaspora background, with very, very traumatic impact of this escape. For her, this is the central event that marks the kind of the emergence of post memory. And I'm trying to argue against her conceptualization a little bit in my presentation. But when we go to post memory, then there are other theories of post memory, but perhaps two most well known are Eva Hoffmann, and she actually came up with that term first, or she started talking about these things first, and then Marianne Hirsch followed. But the important things about what post-memory might be in her elaboration is that it is not really a memory, that it is something that the person herself or himself has not experienced, and that it has this kind of performative aspect to it. It is an enactment, as she puts it. And she says that it is deeply internalized to the extent that we don't always, the person who has it or experiences it, cannot really pinpoint where it comes from. And at the same time, it is strangely unknown. So something is at the same time very much part of you, but also you don't know what it is. And also Hoffmann talks about this emergence of mythical worldview. And Eva Hoffmann, who is most well known for developing this concept, for her, post-memory describes the relationship of the second generation to powerful, often traumatic experiences that preceded their birth, but that were nevertheless transmitted to them so deeply as to seem to constitute memories in their own right. And on this photo, you can see Marianne Hirsch and her husband, Leo Spitzer, and I deliberately put on the slide this kind of photo because they have developed a lot of this thought on post-memory together. And also some of Marianne Hirsch's later work, for example, Ghosts of Home, it juxtaposes some of the perceptions or some of the ideas that she developed first in the concept, but the concept is very, very popular and very central in memory studies, and one of the central nexuses also of traumatic memory. And it has been picked up in rather uniform manner. So it is often looked at as this very coherent paradigm that has to be applied in exactly one kind of manner. And when working with the concept of post-memory, it has seemed to me that there would be other ways of talking about received or inherited memory, and also other ways of looking what is traumatic about it, its dynamics, etc. Okay, but concerning the diaspora, life stories of diaspora Estonians, this question arises why we should apply this concept of post-memory. And these observations are from Tiina Kers. And she points out that not just in terms of diaspora, but also in terms of our past in general, she says that it is an important means of coping with arduous events of the 20th century, and also related to it is a need for transformation of cultural memory, especially its therapeutic aspects, so that as a means of coping, we can look at it on more individual level, but there is a very pronounced kind of shift or need to another level, that this individual coping means also transformation of cultural memory, and that there is a need for that But more specifically looking at post-memory and exile, Leena Kirs has said that it is important to look into what constitutes received memory in second and third generation life stories of exile Estonians. And my actually my interest in particular is on third generation exile Estonians, but there is not a very big corpus of life narratives that of third generation Estonians. And then also between the first generation, those who emigrated, and the second generation, those who were born in exile, there is the 1.5 generation. And I think that is quite important also. And I think this when we look at the ways of how post-memory might work with this 1.5 generation, I think the findings are especially interesting. And as I said, for Tiina Kirs, this central event, central traumatic event is the escape journey. And as she has said, that how do we look for post-memory in the life stories of exile Estonians or diaspora Estonians, that we could see how someone is searching for one's own life on someone else's landscapes of memory. But I think also the way that Marianne Hirsch has developed the concept, and also the way it has been picked up by Tiina Kirs, it gives you a rather a strict frame. There is this first occasion, this inherited memory that you get, that is not your memory, and then you go on from there, but you are, as if in a way you are stuck with what you have inherited. And there are many other dimensions to Hirsch's paradigm, and simply I don't have time to go into them right now, and not all of them are also important for my current talk. But also concerning that, Hirsch emphasizes remembering only by means of stories, images, and behaviors, among which these, as she says, hinge generation men and women grew up. Then my question about application of this concept and about Hirsch's thought is there any other way to look at this? What processes of transformation occur later in life? How do they change the memorial heritage of childhood? And Hirsch's own later work, Ghosts of Home, the Afterlives of Chernomits in Jewish Memory, that she co-authored with Leo Spitzer, it makes visible that post-memory is also traveling memory. Or to use the phrase of Astrid Erl, there is a distinctive movement, kind of not from roots of memory, like root in the sense, in what is in the ground, to root as in the sense of a journey, but that in the case of post-memory, I think roots and roots become entangled, and that this kind of entanglement is also a kind of a temporal dynamics. And I think that this is what is perhaps missing right now in the research on post-memory of diaspora Estonians. And this would be perhaps the direction I would like to take, doing further research on them. Okay. But also Tiina Kirs has cautioned against using this concept. She says that working with interview materials requires ethical sensibility and perception of the threshold where analysis needs to stop. It is inappropriate to apply the concept of post-memory in interpreting interviews, though this conception can be used for pointing to some aspects of the after effects of escape journeys and exile experience. And I have also struggled with her statement because I do not have diaspora background myself, and it has kind of like a little bit like pushed me away from working with these materials. But it has also been for me a starting point for thinking about post-memory in new directions, also thinking about the people, about myself and other people like me, the descendants of people whose family members left, and whether we can also talk about post memory in that kind of sense. And really thinking through my own experience, I have felt that yes, we can and we should, but I haven't been able to done much with that for this presentation. But I will go on now with some examples. My first example concerns exactly the escape journey. And if you look at the birth date of the woman from whose interview it comes from, 1969, you can see that she is third generation exile Canadian Estonian. She talks about the escape journey of her grandparents in the following manner. My grandparents started their escape journey from Haapsalu at the second half of September 1944. I don't know the exact date. Across the stormy sea with two young children. My mother was 18 months old, her sister only 6 months. I have tried to put myself in this position. When I asked my parents about their escape, there was time when I thought that I would have stayed. This means that I was not able to imagine that fear, to take two children and to go floating on the waves in some small nutshell. It makes me think, how could one put one's children to such risk? So this is not an example of inherited memory, because she does not kind of take over the rhetorics of the escape. She considers it from her contemporary perspective, based on her context. For her, this is this kind of unnecessary risk, or what mother would do this. This is her first reaction to this story. And then she goes on, my mem, that is grandmother, explained that she was not thinking like that. You had to go and everyone was going, and nevertheless people hoped and believed. And in particular in a situation when Dart, that is her grandfather, could have perhaps been taken away, that is arrested, as he had been active in national movements. There was no question, and you just went like a robot. And in this here, in the interview, it is interesting how the discourse or her voice changes. So she does not speak here in her own voice. She takes over her grandmother's voice, and she takes a new position. And you can say that this is a good example of kind of post memory visible here, that she's talking about something in a very kind of emotionally agitated manner that is not her experience. But the way she rendered her life story during that interview, these two things, her own positioning toward this event, and then taking kind of her grandmother's position, they are side by side and they are in dialogue with each other. So there's already this kind of dynamics there that goes partially against this very uniform paradigm of post memory. And I have some other examples that how to say that exemplify how post memory might emerge in the life stories to different extent. For example, Saaremaal Johani, who was second generation this diaspora Estonian. The title of my talk comes from her life story. My memory is sometimes like a big house, so that it takes a long time to get up the stairs and reach the right room. And I have thought a lot about what she means. What is this big house for her? And is it someone else's? Is it like a family estate that she doesn't know how to navigate very well? Or is it her own house of memory that she has built? And I think that is a combination of both. But also if we think that this is her own house of memory, that it is a complicated affair anyway. But also I think that that she would use this metaphor of house for memory. Of course, there are mnemonic strategies that base this ability to remember something on a building, that certain things are in a certain room in a certain building, and this is how you remember things. So there's that background, of course, to this metaphor too. But if you think of house in terms of diaspora. It where he states the houses that people lost. This was a lot of the diaspora life stories talk about their families' houses, especially in the country and homesteads, and fearing to come back to them, and thinking what it might be, and mythologizing them, and then kind of interacting critically with these kinds of mythologies. So I think it is a powerful metaphor there. But in her life story or interview, she talks about this knowledge that influences her relationship with her homeland, but it is not this knowledge, this possibly traumatic perception of the past is not related to her family's flight to the West, but it is related to what happened in Estonia. So the dynamics is slightly different from the one that, for example, Tiina Kirs has pointed out. And there is this, in her life story, there is very conscious, this kind of working through or knowledge of how to deal with that. And at the end of her interview, she reaches some kind of solution or conclusion. She talks how she has worked through these issues. But there's another example from Käosaar, who was born in Estonia but was very young, and he in his interview says kind of points out himself that he's not sure that he was there, perhaps, but he's not sure if it's his memory or something that has been transmitted by his parents, whether he really, this question of witnessing emerges here. And there is this, my last example concerns life story that was written in English and submitted to the last life story, the last bigger life story competition. And it is by a diaspora Estonian from US, who was born in New Jersey. And she starts her life story with a poem, and the poem is actually both in Estonian and in English. And I must say that it sounds better, or it kind of makes more sense in Estonian. But of course, for this presentation, it was very comfortable that I could have it here in English. And she has written it also in both languages. But she writes, who slipped this place in me? Was it my choosing, or has it crept unknown? When did it come to quicken my breath and then supply the resting sigh? I am a refugee's child, daughter of a true native, daughter of southwestern Estonia, who grew up with her mother's hollow in her heart. So I think that this is very clearly also an example of kind of conscious perception of memory, kind of along the lines of post-memory. But also there is this question of what do I do with it, or like how deliberate is our memory and what we can do about it. But her life story that follows, she says that she, as a child already, she was very attached to one woman who was an expert on national songs, and she refers to her as the songstress in her life story. And her influence actually made her choose her profession, that she became a music therapist in her life. So it has, in her life story is basically about finding answers to these questions. But there are, one of the features of post-memory is this perception of a mythical homeland. And there are many examples in the life stories that concern this. And I don't have time to talk about this more, but I think this dynamics of return visits, that it is very interesting and very complex. And the question of what happens to this mythical homeland when you go there, I think that also demands quite a bit of further investigation. But there is one example that I found slightly unbelievable, and as in this sense, even a bit humorous. Levi Kazak James writes that in 1994, when she went to visit Estonia with her sister, that she went to visit the family farmstead, and she had heard a lot of stories from her parents, and she said that they felt that, of course, the parents exaggerated, that everything seemed more beautiful than it was. But getting there, she says, or she comes to the conclusion, everything seemed as beautiful as our parents' stories, and even more beautiful. We were as if in a fairy tale. And the way she talks about this farmstead, it is as if you are in a fairy tale. If you think that this was 94, and even when the farmhouses had been given back to their former owners, this was it's very rare occasion that in 1994 the farmhouse would have been already in this perfect shape. But she writes, or she says, at the Andres farmstead, rye bread is still baked the same way in the same oven with similar starter. When we visited the farm, my father's sister-in-law was sitting in the front yard and was doing the laundry on a washboard. An old woman in her late 80s doing this kind of work. It seemed like ancient times. The Andres farmstead was exactly like we had imagined an Estonian farm to be. And if you think of in practical terms, then in 1994, if you think of actually living in the farm and engaging in agricultural work, this is in a way not the way to be. You can do it as a kind of like a hobby way of being, but there are other more efficient ways of also keeping a farm and engaging with agriculture. So it is exactly this kind of mythical perception. And of course there is no way of finding out if this is true or what are the contexts, but it is in that sense a rather remarkable example. But there are many other examples about these return visits and about getting to know your country again and getting to know the people and this very complex and multi-directional dynamics there. And this presentation is about Estonian life stories, but this kind of dynamics, I think, it's very prevalent in diaspora Latvians. Edmunds Valdemars Bunkšas absolutely beautiful life story, Geography and the Art of Life. I admit this is one of my favorite books. And I also have written an article about his kind of dynamics of place relating to home and return visits. Okay, but I will not finish with a conclusion in that sense. I will finish with some kind of outlining some further possibilities for studying post-memory and migration, and I mean here in Estonian context. I think more attention should be paid on formats, techniques, and effective modalities of transmission to kind of study in a very detailed manner exactly what and how it was transmitted, and this these dynamics of transmission. For example, to study this, how when people say that these were the stories that were told to me, if there is information, look at what kind of relationship is between the person to whom the story is told and the peers. What kind of context did these discussions take place? Is there a dynamics of discussions? All these kinds of things. And also definitely variations of identity positions and modes of identifications. I think at the end of her talk, Vieda gave a perfect example that there is a variety of identity positions, because when she was asked about her childhood, she says, I'm not your typical diaspora Latvian at all. But then what it made clear to me is that we should also think about this normative typical, but also all these variations of identity that are around it. And it is important to take it place. But also I think most important to me that is to make interconnections between roots and roots of memory, to look into this travel of memory. And Julia Creed, whom also Vieda mentioned in her talk, is a Canadian memory studies scholar who has done beautiful work on traveling memory. Also look at the dynamics of sites of memory, so that it's not unidirectional from your new country of new settlement, then back to your homeland, that this dynamics of sites of memory is far more complex, I think. And then definitely there are these transnational and transatlantic dimensions. And lastly, I'm thinking that post-memory of migration, of descendants of those who stayed behind, should also be studied. Thank you.